Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to our Resident Services Committee meeting. Before I go into any of the business, I'm just going to read out the fire evacuation procedures for evening meetings. So there's no fire alarm scheduled for this evening, and therefore if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and, unless otherwise instructed, and meet in the War Memorial Park. Members, please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and if people would please switch their phones off or put them on silent. And just to remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, you must speak directly into your microphone. Okay, so that's that bit. Right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our members of the public and our visiting councillors. This is obviously something that we've pulled this meeting here today because of a situation that's occurred, and we want to make sure that we have good visibility of what's going on. So the first item is the apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillor Lee has been replaced by Councillor Gary Watts, and that's the only one we have. Point 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, right, now we'll move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October. Are the committee agreed that the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2025 are an accurate record? Thank you. Right, so I will now sign those minutes. Okay, so we're going into, we only have one item, a very important item that we're covering tonight, which is the review of the Cabinet decision to select Downgrange as the preferred site for the re-provision of golf facilities. And the purpose of this report is, so we're going to go into the actual report, and the purpose of this report that we're about to look at is to outline the assessment criteria and the process undertaken for the selection and consideration of the long list and short list of sites which supported the decision taken by Cabinet on the 7th of January 2025 to select Downgrange as the preferred site for the re-provision of golf facilities and to progress with further investigations and detailed design work. So Councillor Morrow is going to introduce the item as the Cabinet member first, and then we'll get into allowing people to have their little speech.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members and visiting speakers. First, I would like to thank Councillor Alex Lee. It's a shame he's not here because I wanted to say thank you for putting this agenda item forward. It's clear that this is a matter of public interest, and it's clear that he has taken time to consider the issue at hand and consider the outcomes and outputs that he would like to achieve from tonight's scrutiny committee. Reminding everyone of the background, back in March 2023, an agreement was made to dispose of the Basingstoke Golf Centre to support the development of the Great Wolf Resort, with the stipulation that we were to come up with a strategy to re-provide the golf facilities. Final terms of this deal were then agreed in July 2024. Roughly 6 months later, in January 2025, the Cabinet made a decision to select Downgrange as its preferred site for this golf re-provision. At the same time, the decision reserved land at the leisure park. The next steps were to come up with more detailed plans and to engage with sports clubs and residents at and around Downgrange. That brings us up to the decision in January. A lot has happened since then, and we can discuss that. But first, I'd like to draw you to the two main points of this agenda item. One is to look closely at the process and evidential basis that informed the decision in January. So the process and the evidence that informed the Cabinet decision to select Downgrange as the preferred site for the golf re-provision. And two is for the committee to review the other sites and consider any ideas around how we can re-provide the pitch and putt in the future. This committee's suggestions will help inform the LRNA, which is our Leisure Recreational Needs Assessment, updated in 2027, so inform that. And it will also, the recommendations will be added to the report on the golf re-provision that is coming to Cabinet in January 2026. So thank you for everyone for turning up. I welcome a strong debate. It's a bit of a shame it's in here because it's not the best, but do try and get involved as much as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. So now I'm going to invite the public speakers to make their comments. You do have 2 minutes each, and I've got first Stuart Johnston now. Just to put you at ease, 2 minutes is the official time. I know there's a little bit of nerves about whether or not you fit it in. It really doesn't matter if you go over a little bit, because I'd rather you feel at ease and get your chance to have your say, as is the right thing to do.
I'm here to speak regarding Downgrange golf proposal and the impact what they will have on sport in Basingstoke. Regarding the golf re-provision, the council's own policy states that the re-provision facilities should be provided that are equal or better than existing facilities. In the case of the Downgrange proposals, this is clearly not the case, with a reduction of holes from 9 to 6. The plans do not and cannot provide an equal offering to represent a significant downgrade in the facilities provided by the council. In terms of athletics, the Basingstoke Athletics Club has more than 850 members and has been a key component in the sporting landscape of the town since 1948, producing Olympic, World, European and Commonwealth medalists. One of these medalists was Maddie Dedman, who won a bronze medal at the European Cross Country Championships last year. Maddie trained at Downgrange Park. Another was World 800 metres bronze medalist Ben Patterson, who also trained in Downgrange Park. Up to 400 athletes of all ages from 8 to 80 train in Downgrange Park per week. Several times a year, hundreds of young athletes from across the region compete there. If this proposal goes through, all of that ends. In terms of the Disc Golf Club, Basingstoke Disc Golf Club started in 2012. In the absence of a permanent course within the borough, we've been using Downgrange as our playing area for the past 13 years. Within that time, the club has produced a British Masters champion, a British Amateur champion, and a British Junior champion. In 2017, the club hosted an international competition, the WFDF Combined World Championships, with competitors from across the world. If this proposal goes through, it will effectively end our club in its current form. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, Lucy, it's your turn. Lucy Wayne.
Good evening. Just 3 weeks ago, Councillor Kerry Morrow posted on Facebook a comment that included the words, "the lack of publicly owned green space in Basingstoke." So, in order to mitigate public objections about the loss of green space at Downgrange Park, the council announced it would create a municipal pitch and putt, thereby creating multiple health and safety issues. You are expecting the public to walk, sit, cycle and relax right next to golfers who are using low-impact golf balls that can travel over 130 miles an hour. When we visited the municipal Queen's Park Club in Bournemouth, they told us they report several hospitalisations in a typical year. They also said that a dog's leg had been broken after being hit by a golf ball. At Avingdon Park Golf Course in Winchester, which we also visited, they say it's common to find balls 100 metres away, beyond a line of trees and over a fenced road. In Aberdeen, a pensioner was hit in the head outside his home by an experienced golfer who struck the ball too far to the left. He spent 5 days in hospital. A ball hitting a car on the interior road of Downgrange or the A30 could cause a severe accident, and severe accidents cause deaths. And people with protected characteristics such as blindness will absolutely be displaced due to the safety issues you are creating. So removing protected groups in favour of golfers is discrimination. Given the small space you are trying to squeeze your pitch and putt course on, there is absolutely no way you can make it a safe municipal site, because you cannot 100% guarantee to control people's behaviour with a golf club and ball in their hands. Even installing fences and paths, against your promise, by the way, that you wouldn't, will still not keep the public safe, and people ignore signs. It takes just one person to hit a ball at 100 miles per hour into a pedestrian, and that pedestrian could feasibly die. So, the result of your municipal pitch and putt course is that for the public to stay safe, they will have to avoid using the area. Irrespective of what you call it, we will lose access to Downgrange Park, and there is no other alternative. So today, we ask you to start actually listening, and please take Downgrange off the table forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, and finally, Claire Harrison.
Good evening. I urge this committee to redress the failings of the original decision to put the pitch and putt and the golf centre on Downgrange Park. This will result in the removal of unencumbered access for thousands of users, including athletics, hockey, disc golf, rugby, football, brownies, guides, running clubs, dog walkers, cyclists, and many more. The project team, including cabinet members, officers and councillors, admitted being unaware of the site's high usage and not visiting it, even before some of them voted against a decision review on the 16th of October. This lack of due diligence has left sports clubs, groups and the public trying for nearly 9 months to get the council to acknowledge that the January 25 decision was misguided, as it was made without usage information or engagement with sports clubs. We've gathered compelling evidence on the site's high use, including heat maps, testimonials, club statistics, along with the responses from the council's own feedback form, the results of which are still pending. Heavy traffic entering from Pack Lane already strains this site. More pitch and putt users will only increase congestion and risks to safety, an issue Downgrange residents have already raised. The focus should be on finding a suitable alternative for the pitch and putt, given that the council now have some facts on the usage and various risks associated. Our campaign has united this town. This is evident in the 6,500 interactions on our Facebook page since the 5th of September, and over 7,000 petition signatures since the 1st of May, more than 3,000 of which are from the borough. We continue to urge the council to listen and protect Downgrange Park by ruling it out of these plans altogether. We will continue to make ours and the town's voices heard. And lastly, if you haven't seen this beautiful space already for yourself, we would very happily show you around. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to all the public speakers. Well done. They're all very good and very well informed. I made some notes, actually. That's quite good. So now I'm going to go back to Kerry, who can respond to those 3 comment speeches.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming here and talking to me tonight. I've got to admit, I have listened. I know you don't want to hear that, but I've really listened to all the good work you've done. And I'm really quite impressed with the community that you've brought together and all the different, like you say, the heat maps showing what the runners do, the way they run round. You know, I've kept a good eye on that. Apart from that, I've been visiting the site way before January. I've even tackled other issues on the site which needed looking at. After that, we've done engagement with all sports clubs there. We've actually changed our proposals because of what the sports clubs have said. Obviously, we're not going to agree on everything at all. I'll just start with Stuart. I mean, Stuart knows that I come on a Sunday morning and saw what the disc golf is about. It's a lovely community, and it does fit in really well at Downgrange. And I would, if we get to a point where this goes to a planning, I would put that forward, and I would represent that at planning. Yeah. Also, you mentioned the athletics. And that is one of the things that is really most, is something from my sports side, which I'd like to represent the most. There clearly is a lot of use, Tuesday night training, Thursday night training. They use the whole site. That's been recorded, that's been collected, because we have been out there and we have been listening. I'll go on to Lucy. I think, unfortunately, we have to listen to the experts. We've got a golf course designer who's told us that these designs are safe. And, you know, so I also understand that it is, you know, other people got concerns and we have to weigh them up, and I'm not the decision maker at the end of the day. So we just have to put them forward. I'm quite glad someone's looking at my social media, to be honest. I'm surprised. Go on to Claire Harrison. Again, you know, saying that we're not visiting. We have visited. Car parking is a massive issue at Downgrange. The access is terrible. There's lots of plans that we'd like to do to improve Downgrange. Part of the golf re-provision, we might have been able to pull resources together to tackle some of them problems. But no, there are existing issues, antisocial behaviour, you know, just where people don't have enough parking, so they park on the side of the road, so you can't get back and forth up the site. But no, other than that, I'll let maybe the officers want to reply on some of the points. They're probably better at noting down what you said and responding. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Right, now we're going to go to the members who have, visiting members that is, who have come to also talk, and they will have 4 minutes to speak. So first of all, we have Councillor Andy McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. So there's 4 things I'd like to raise as part of this for councillors to consider tonight. Point 1, like-for-like provision evidently wasn't a very high consideration. We need to understand why it was considered acceptable to replace 9 holes, a full driving range and a crazy golf course with just 6 holes and a simulated driving range, which is a much reduced and much less attractive offer. Point 2, looking at the consideration of sites, and having now had a look at the sites considered, some were obviously too small, but others, such as Many Down and Popley Fields, listed here as Carpenters Down playing fields, have massive potential, good access, large areas, and the golf could be sited away from residential property, especially the driving range. Point 3, council-owned land seems to be an overriding concern. I'd like to understand why some of the sites that may not be council land but obviously had potential, like Worting House, were not considered. Point 4, there appears to be inconsistent treatment of shared sites, so places like Gershwin Road, Stratton Park, Winkleby Plainfields were rightly ruled out through football use and known issues with parking, especially parking on the road. At least 2 of those aforementioned sites, there's a serious road safety issue. But Downgrange, which has 3 established clubs, the rugby club, the hockey club, the athletics club, and other activities such as disc golf. Admittedly, Downgrange is larger than the aforementioned sites, but there will still be issues with access and parking, especially coming off that busy A30 onto Miller and Carter. That's a dangerous junction, and if we were expecting serious numbers of visitors, I would be alarmed at that. And the 5th point, and this is probably the most important point, is engagement with the public. This was frankly shocking. It was an embarrassment to this council, the way people were treated at the last full council meeting, and I sincerely hope whatever we learn from this tonight, we learn to treat our residents better in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, Councillor Tony Jones.
I'll stand up, Chair. You're going to have to get used to this. Thank you. Yeah, I'll start off straight away. The site it's on now is ideal for pitch and putt, for driving range. We know in reality the Southam councillors was going to lose that argument. Money takes over big business. But what we were promised was like for like. And what we've actually got is nothing like for like. Yeah, these machines and everything else, for driving. Yeah, they're good. They're up. They're putting some up in my golf club. But the cost of putting them in and the cost of running them is quite high. Plus, the residents will be paying for them. You know, you've got to pay for pitch and putt now, but if they want, and driving range, but nothing like that will, you know, the charge will be higher eventually. And the other thing I would like to say, just to clear the air a bit, because I was absolutely annoyed at the council, where we were accused of trying to sabotage Great Wolf's endeavours to buy that by your people on your side, so don't look vague. And I got it in the air, if you remember rightly. Well, you can go like that as much as you like. Anyway, we were never going to do that. We accepted that if we had to move, we wanted like for like. We had one consultation meeting with officers. We didn't like the idea of the simulation things. We didn't like the idea of the 6 holes. And no one's ever came back to us. So why would we agree to it? Well, you know, we're not daft. And where are you going to put it? Well, don't you think as the ward councillors you should have had more consultation with us about where you was intending or what the other sites were? What else have I got in there? As I say, Downgrange in its entirety. I used to live quite near. I've got residents from the Berg estate. They take their dogs, go for a walk. It's not too far. Quite elderly people. They enjoy it. When the athletics is on, it's very busy, cars and everything else. It's a bad road going either way, but I know they park down on Pack Lane. They're always struggling to get out at night or whatever. There's going to be an accident there, so we should have Hampshire County Council involved, trying to get some lights or something there so that they can come in and out. But that's another issue. This hasn't been thought through. You haven't talked to us one little bit. As I say, Downgrange used to have football, and I don't know whether they still do. It used to be 3 pitches. They've gone. But it's been taken over by things that fit in. You know, years ago, they were talking about the rugby. They wanted to fence off the thing, and there was a big petition against that. But we managed to get round it by actually listening to what the people were willing to accept. But this is just running roughshod over us, and I really don't accept that at all. And if I was you as the cabinet holder, I'd have a word with a few of your people, the way they actually talk to people. Because if they talk to me like that outside, they know what talking to people will be like.
Sorry, can I intervene there?
You can certainly intervene.
Can you just clarify what you meant there by...
What I meant by was when people were quoting that I, as a person of BasingstokeGov Club, and it would be on the thing, we're getting the money.
I didn't know you meant that, that's why I was going.
Yeah, well, that don't matter, does it?
Anyway, Councillor Jones.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Morrow, if you'd like
sorry, I wanted to know what you were referring to, and I didn't understand that was it. And I agree, I think that was pretty out of order what they said on the night. But people have their right to say what they want at a council meeting. I mean,
members.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, sorry, I pulled a couple of faces because at the end of the day, I remember what I said. I don't particularly remember what my colleagues had said on the night. It's not the way I do politics. I'm very honest and open with what I say to you and others, and I don't, so that's why I didn't realise what you were even referring to, Yeah. Right, Councillor McCormick, like for like, I think that's a real big issue with this re-provision. It's something that is quite difficult to achieve when you have a very large bit of land in the middle of Basingstoke, and we are trying to re-provide the facilities which are valued. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm, quite passionate about trying to create a decent re-provision. What we had to look at was, we did have a 9-hole pitch and putter first. We talked to groups, and we changed that to become a 6-hole. Also, when we look at reprovision, it's not just about the same, it's about size, but it's also about usage. So you've got to look at the usage at the current golf centre, and you can have a bigger facility, but if the usage isn't there, then actually the smaller facility will actually cope with that usage. So that's something to look at there. I can't remember all your other points. I'm sure we'll discuss them as we go on.
Councillor England.
I've made some comments.
Yeah.
Sorry, I made. Have you got them?
Yeah, again, so I've been prompted about, you said about council-owned land. We did look at other land. One of the things about something that's in our control is that we can have an effect on the cost, so we can keep that cost low for our residents.
You're getting a fortune off the drop.
Oh yeah, one of the things was about access, wasn't it, on Pack Lane. I think, like I said before, having more car parking actually helps us to better manage the traffic flow. Just wanted to also, people have mentioned about opportunities for engagement and talking to councillors. Before the decision, ward councillors were invited in to look at these proposals. And obviously we have done engagement from January onwards.
Thank you, Chair. I think just in response to Councillor McCormick, just around your comment around the inconsistent treatment, I think as you just kind of highlighted there, all of these sites are constrained in some way, shape or form. It is quite tricky. I think Councillor Morris just highlighted actually we're proposing access off Pack Lane, but I think we'll probably come on to discuss with members of the committee around sort of the sites and obviously the SWAT and some of the constraints there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do any of the other officers want to make any comments? Have any feedback at this point?
So I think Councillor Jones is still there, but I think Councillor Jones, as one of his key points, was around cost. Obviously, I think as Councillor Murray has highlighted, by focusing on land that is directly within the council control, we then can control the future operation and management of that and make sure that facilities going forward are still accessible and affordable. And I think just back to the like-for-like point as well, technology kind of does move on in the golfing world, in all kind of sports worlds. And sort of new track and trace technology, particularly around driving ranges, does give an enhanced offer nowadays. You can increase your throughput through some of these facilities as well. So there is a sort of a counterbalance there.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now go into asking questions. This is for members of the committee. Oh, and Councillor Dillow's already got a question, okay? Before we start going into the questions, I'm just going to sort of, because this could go into quite a lot of areas, and I have discussed with the officers, and I know people may well want to look at and discuss the sites, but we'll look at, with the questions, it's purely questions about clarification within the report, possibly in the appendices, although appendices I don't think really should warrant too many questions. They might do, the officers might be able to come back with something. And then we'll go into obviously the further discussion from there. So I've got. So, Councillor Dillow.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I echo that. I think it's important that everyone here is clear that that this committee is not a decision-making committee. We're here to basically, our role is to scrutinise the process, isn't it, for which a decision has been made, and whether that process is basically fair, transparent and robust, I suppose. So I think it's important that we shouldn't be drawn into proposing alternative sites ourselves, because scrutiny is not the decision-making body. and it is the administration that has chosen to pursue this relocation, and therefore the administration that must identify suitable locations. I have several concerns that point clearly to the need for a genuine Plan B. Firstly, I feel that the site process appears to have been constrained from the outset to council-owned land only, and that immediately narrows the field and inevitably, I suppose, favours certain types over others. And there is no evidence that non-council land, partnership opportunities or phased or temporary solutions were meaningfully considered at the outset. And that raises really, I suppose, a legitimate question as to whether the criteria itself was too narrow and outcome driven. Secondly, while 7 sites were shortlisted, the report really provides no clarity on which sites came second or third, or how close they were to Down Grange, or how the various factors were weighted. All sites were acknowledged to be imperfect in many ways. And what is missing is a transparent explanation of why the significant impacts at Down Grange, including loss of open park land and I suppose conflict with existing users like the disc group, the Down Grange community, the athletics club and everything like that, were deemed acceptable. And while impacts elsewhere were not. And finally, I suppose public opinion was clearly not, or doesn't seem to be, a determining factor at the point that preferred sites were selected. And it appears a lot of consultation and engagement took place after Down Grange had already been chosen, meaning residents were asked to comment on a proposal rather than genuinely influence any decision. So that is a fundamental issue on trust and transparency, I feel. So I really feel that we should be looking at the process and really deciding whether the administration needs to go back and widen the criteria and take a step back and think about looking at a Plan B, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillo. Hopefully I've captured all of those points and will respond in order. With regards to the assessment criteria, you're right, that did include land in council ownership because that is directly within the control of the council, so we can influence deliverability there, particularly the time frames that we can take it in. Officers at the beginning did consider, I think, picking up on an earlier Cabinet report, I think one of the very first Cabinet reports actually in 2023 on the Great Wolf deal and the requirements for a Gulf reprovision strategy as part of that conversations with third parties. And we did sort of look at land that was for sale across the borough. But there were issues with that around infrastructure, supporting land, locations. Again, it's not often in an accessible location. There's not actually that much land for sale within the immediate area. So we did look at that. We also talked to existing golf clubs and third parties. You then get into the complexities of subsidy control, how you can work with a third party and then genuinely make sure whatever comes as a proposal from that is still accessible and affordable for members of the public in use of facilities. So so that was considered, but we were working with that criteria. So I've noted down your comments there around whether that was too narrow, outcome driven, and like I say, whether that should be widened. But we did have those considerations in the first place. I think with regards to your second point around transparency, I think you can see the logic in how we've against that criteria, looked at the long lists of sites that were in sort of council ownership and then sort of whittled that down to a short list which met that criteria in part and in part more than others. I think with regards to the ranking and the weighting of that, we tried to put that forward in the, I have to be careful how I say.
No one noticed.
No, I said ranking. Waiting, thank you. It was presented in a SWOT analysis basis. I think that's subjected to a point, but it is balanced, and it tried to give an overview of all of those sites and all of, as I said, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats with each of them. So that's kind of where we got to there. And I think on your public opinion point, I think again it's going back to at the point of decision that Cabinet made on the 7th of January was obviously to progress Downgrange as the preferred option, subject to undertaking further due diligence work through the concepts and what that might look like for Downgrange, and fundamentally engage with the residents. And that, is very much what's happened after that decision. So, this Cabinet decision was at a point in time, and the decision was to obviously undertake more work, which I think you can see has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Vaux.
Thank you, Councillor Down. So I heard the comments that some work, and it's certainly in the Cabinet paper in January, commercial sector reprovision, that there was some looking at buying land or similar. Did officers explore the whole lot going into a commercial organisation? These golfing activities are profitable if they are well managed, especially if there's a significant sum of money put to it. I mean, there's £1 million being put aside for this. There are lots of golf clubs in the area, some of them with pretty good accessibility. I would just like to understand if that option was explored, or were we narrowed down to literally the council had to own this in order to go ahead? So that's my first question. My second one is the weighting of the criteria. I find quite bizarre that it just comes out in a SWOT. Because, if I look at the criteria in the paper and put Downgrange against it, it fails against most of them. But most of these do. All of them have a problem. So I would like to understand with Many Down is the exception to the shortlisted sites that are there. The others are existing green spaces, mostly, that have other things going on, whereas Many Down is a blank canvas at the moment, and it will have lots of infrastructure, it will have lots of sporting facilities, and yet the SWOT implies that the threats and weaknesses for that are very minor. They're around who owns the land, really, which feels quite minor given where we are in the Many Down process. So those are my two questions. I would like to understand a bit more about, did we look at other golf courses and clubs, and secondly, the Many Down one, why did it get jettisoned, really?
Yeah, I'll probably bring in other members of the team who spent more time liaising and discussing, particularly the market and the commercial offers. I think, yes, we did explore market and commercial interest. There is definitely market interest in certain elements of the reprovision, namely the driving range in whatever traditional or more modern technology formats that are coming into the marketplace, with the track and trace technology, whether that's indoor, whether that's outdoor. So very much so. I think the complexity you have is the pitch and putt element. Just picking up on your point that it's all profitable. It's not all profitable. As a package, it works collectively together. But I think if you were just to take the pitch and putt in isolation, that's one of the more costly things to operate. That is not as commercially attractive to third-party commercial operators. They're definitely in the marketplace for the golf pod and adventure golf facilities. So we, have been exploring that alongside this, and that was very much linked to the reserving of land on the leisure park as well. And with regards to Many Down being a blank canvas, or Many Down South, is subject to an option by Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Deane Borough Councils. We don't actually own the land yet. We have an option on the land. Therefore, it's not actually within our direct control. It's still sort of at the Reg 18 sort of land promotion stage for the local plan process. You know, there are archaeological and heritage constraints on Manydown, but absolutely within the whole of the land allocation at Manydown, there will be sport, leisure, facilities of some shape or form that will come forward in the future. However, the SWOT reflects that that there is no infrastructure at the moment. It is not directly within the council's control, and it would be very costly to introduce, to determine what parcel of land. There isn't a mechanism to just access that in isolation, and the timeline for that is probably a lot more in the medium term.
But we're not time constrained to re-provide, are we?
But this is about process.
Kerry?
Yeah, I think the timeline is a big problem with the Manydown. It's a long way down the line, so that's a big factor. It may be something that comes into play now, now that in the future decision that's coming forward.
Yeah, just going on that. In terms of the other sort of commercial operators and the golf clubs around Basingstoke, one of the first things that we looked at was the other sort of 6 or 7 golf clubs that operate in the borough. So we did make contact with those golf clubs and try and understand what their plans were for the future, whether there was any opportunity to try and provide a pitch and putt or some other short form golf facility that could replace the current golf centre pitch and putt course. And the upshot of that is that those that were maybe interested, their plans were quite far in the future, and sort of didn't really fit the timescales. And again, I think as Sarah mentioned, there'd be issues around subsidy control if certain proposals were to be taken forward. But yeah, they were considered, and it's still something to maybe investigate further if need be.
Councillor Morrow?
Just also I'd like to mention that England Golf and the Leisure Recreational Needs Assessment, they look at the golf centre very differently to the golf courses. And if you are someone who plays golf, going to a golf club is very different to playing pitch and putt. They're completely different target audiences. The people that use the golf centre don't consider themselves golfers. They're just families. They're people having a go. You will get some people that like to still use it because it's easy. It's a nice short course. You might get some elderly people that have given up golf and still use it. So it's very different. Golf England look at it differently, and so does the LRNA. The LRNA says that we have enough golf courses in the borough. But it really does value this golf reprovision at a low entry level.
Go on, Jenny.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick reply, Councillor Morrow, is that I would not be proposing that this would be provided as part of a club in the sense that people would have to join the club. I'm not a golfer, but I know quite a lot of people who are, and I do go to golf clubs. And I think there are definitely elements to the land that golf clubs use where you could have access to an area of land which is a turn up and play as against where the club members go. And, I'm slightly sympathetic to the view that you would, if you're looking for an entry level coming into golf, it's quite nice to have it where you've got a golf course that would hopefully be welcoming to those people. It's just a little reflection whilst we're in that topic. Thank you.
So I totally agree with you, and I really hope that something like that would come forward. In reality, I'm a little bit concerned because they're at capacity, so they're not looking for feeder clubs or anything like that. But if any opportunity does where their golf courses maybe are deciding to sort of sell off some of their land and some remains, maybe we can look at that, and that would be, again, a medium, long-term sort of look, hopefully.
Councillor Watts?
Thank you, Chair. On the process, how do we, looking at the report, we didn't assess the sites against our local plan policies. Looking at EM5, green and blue infrastructure, there's lots of little clauses in this very important green space policy we have. But if I just pick out some of them, the council will seek to protect and enhance the quality and the extent of green space and public right of way, including public open space and access to the countryside. And there's lots of other little clauses in here, and it says, a robust assessment clearly demonstrates that the space is surplus to requirements, and that my computer's got stuck. But it basically says you need to do a long-term assessment, and that this land is no longer needed for long-term use. So looking at the report, there has been no assessment against our local plan policies, and looking at all the sites on there, I don't think any of them would actually fit a planning brief for EM5. And I think, as previous councillors have actually said, the Many Down site would be the only site that would fit that criteria. Also, I'd like to explore the commercial aspect, why the Borough Council all alone is that we should be providing this pitch and putt facility. Why didn't we go out to the private sector and the commercial sector to look? I didn't see a lot of that in the report. I'd also like to explore the Great Wolf agreement we have with Great Wolf. Wrote in a clause that we have to have a like-for-like replacement with Great Wolf. Have we actually signed the contract stating that? I'd like to get a bit more information around that. Thank you.
I was going to say before.
I know the Great Wolf Agreement, we stipulated in that deal that we would we come up with a reprovision strategy within a certain time period. I think we had. Sorry, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have the Great Wolf contract here and can't remember the exact detail, but it would have picked up on the Cabinet decisions, and the contractual obligation was to have a golf reprovision strategy. And I think, from memory, the term was equivalent in there. But I'll have to go away and get that information to you, Councillor Watts, because I don't have the detail of that contract here. But from memory, the obligation was on a reprovision strategy that mentioned equivalent, and that was echoed in the reports that went through to Cabinet.
Just going to speak on the commercial element. I mean, at the end of the day, Basingstoke Golf Centre has always been a council offering. I think it's a fantastic offering. That's why we want to keep it that way. We haven't said no to looking into commercial offerings, and we've been out there looking for options. But at the end of the day, if it's council owned, we can have more control over prices. We can still make sure it's that entry level for residents.
Local plan policies?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think as we highlighted in the report, particularly when we discussed this with the senior leadership of the team of the council, and obviously briefed the portfolio holders as we went through the process on the short list of sites, we were asked to undertake some additional work and get a high-level informal planning assessment, which has obviously been sort of confidential advice, which sort of hasn't formed part of this report, but it was high-level, and that was obviously in advance of any pre-application submission, and obviously we would seek pre-application advice at the right time. So, that was against planning policy. So we did kind of take that into consideration, and again, I'll defer to the team, obviously, because as part of that, we looked at the public open space delegations, we looked at the policies, and we looked at the deficiencies in the areas that were non-deficient, and so I'll just ask you to pick up on that point, if that's okay.
Yeah, so in terms of the sites themselves, I think initially one of the points that we've noted in the report is that they are all, because of the quantum of size that was necessary, they were all within the green infrastructure strategy. So those policies around EM5 and CN8 were always going to be picked up. But in terms of the public open space, I believe the policy is that there's 65 square metres of space required per resident within the ward. And based on the most recent information we've had, the urban wards of Kempshott and Buckskin was the only ward, along with Sherborne, St John and Brookstown, that had more than 65 square metres of public open space available to its residents. So that obviously includes, within Kempshott, that would include the whole of Downgrange, not just the parkland, but the sports pitches as well, which were outside of the proposals.
Thank you. But this site is also next to South Ham Ward, which has a deficiency of green space. All the assessments that this council have done over the years has identified it's got a lack of green space, and green space is diminishing in South Ham, and we're potentially taking away valuable green space adjacent to South Ham and Berg.
I think it was also considering a bigger picture on this as well, because with redevelopment going on in South Ham, the potential that there could be more households, more people there, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think I was looking at this is obviously in the adopted standards, you're right, it's 65 square metres per person, so it's not per dwelling or anything. And I think what we're looking at here is, because we are potentially giving up a large area of green space for a commercial venture in Great Wolf, and I am pro Great Wolf, before anybody wants to say anything, I think it's a great idea. But the challenge this is giving us, as Kerry, and I know Kerry just because I know this is a challenging meeting for you, and I must say you've worked really hard to try to manage something here that's incredibly challenging, and that goes for the officers as well. We've got sites we've looked at, there were obviously criteria set, and the result of it has meant that it feels like sort of trying to fit a bit of to use a very old-fashioned expression, a quart into a pint pot, to try and make something work that's going to please everybody. And unfortunately, this is a challenge, but I do think this area, particularly about EM5 and the green space, if we're losing green space, we need to see that, and that hasn't come out in the paper. So that could be something that could be given back to us later, to find out if it does do that, but that would be a concern. And I think the fact it's come out as a concern is demonstrated by the public feeling of losing green space.
Yeah, so I agree. I think there's a bigger picture that this golf reprovision, isn't fully responsible for, with housing and the loss of green space in our borough. We've got to remember that Downgrange is a 90-acre site. The actual bit we're talking about is 7.5 acres. I think more of the issue is the fact that it is used as the parkland, and that we have an argument over the fact that, we're saying it's still open to people, and other people aren't agreeing with that. So that's where it is. But the actual size of Downgrange and the amount of area there, it's a big site, and these proposals did keep the footpaths open across the site. I just want to make that point, just to get a bit of scale on the size. The conservation area next to it is bigger in size, so there is open space there, and this proposal was keeping the footpaths open.
So they'll have to walk around the perimeter with crash helmets on, is that what you're saying?
At the end of the day, that's where we're at. I mean, I personally think you can have pitch and putt, and you could walk through that site. That's my personal opinion. It's obviously not yours, and it's obviously not other members. Luckily, I'm not the one making the decision, so that will go forward. The Cabinet makes the decision, and we're listening to everyone, and it's all being informed.
Members.
Sorry, Chair, just the paper just said that it had been delegated to you. Have I misunderstood that?
No, sorry. When I said I'm not the only one making the decision, it's that we will listen to we will take feedback on, and there are other members of the Cabinet as well that will feed into this.
Councillor Hart.
Wrong one. Thank you, Chair. Am I right in thinking, sorry, just before I dig in, that we're going to go through some of the SWOT analyses separately, or should I ask absolutely everything now? This might be a lot.
I think the plan was if people wanted to go into any specifically, although the guidance is generally on the process, and then obviously the second recommendation, and actually I think Sean made the point earlier that whereas we're not a decision-making body, it's about whether the second recommendation is valid. So maybe we, as a committee, we might need to decide whether that's valid, and I will have to take advice from my colleague here about what we do about if we want to not do a recommendation.
Okay, well, I'll keep it a bit more general for now then, and then I might circle back around. Although, on that point, I think it's worth noting that although we are not a decision-making body, and Councillor Dillo is quite right about that, asking our advice and our opinion is something that people are complaining wasn't done earlier. I think that if we're being asked for it now, to not give it might be a little churlish. So I would be in favour of keeping to the agenda on that point. I would like to ask, I suppose, because I've never scrutinised a project like this or perhaps any other kind of thing before, so I kind of learned how the planning process works on a project of this scale through learning about this for this purpose. And I'm interested in where there have been questions raised about the process and whether it was sufficient or not. In your experience as officers, and you know, Councillor Morrow as well, if you'd like to, how did this process compare to other sorts of commensurate projects? Are there specifically things that are done in other projects that weren't done here? And picking up on Councillor Jones's point as well, would it be the done thing to normally have more than one meeting with councillors, or with all councillors rather than just those in the surrounding area? I don't know what the norm is, I guess, is what I'm saying. So are there, how does this compare, I suppose? And also, in terms of the equivalency of the reprovision, I know, Sarah, that you said that you couldn't remember off the top of your head what the exact wording was, but the key word was equivalent. What would be the understanding of that word, if it was as loose as that in the caveat to the Great Wolf deal? The caveat was that we needed to reprovision this site, and equivalent was the word that was used, and other than that it was a blank slate. Does that mean that it's entirely a subjective thing in terms of equivalency? Would there be a general planning understanding that I'm not aware of what that means in terms of the exactitude of it, or would commensurate be the same thing, if you see what I mean?
You get something out of the way early. I think giving councillors an opportunity at the start of the process to make their comments and say if they have any issues with the decision is enough. I personally will answer any emails, talk to anyone from any party. So I've had the whole period where I would have answered any queries. Haven't had a lot of queries directly to me from councillors. Actually, I have had emails that I've responded to, thinking about it, say, you know, that door is never closed. We're always happy for councillors to come and talk to me, especially, and I'll give them, you know, what I think.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. With regards to the process and the comparison, every project's sort of slightly different in what you're asked here, you know, and again, obviously as officers we are guided by what members ask us to do. You know, we had a reprovision strategy where we look at how best we can re-provide the facilities of the golf facilities to enable the Great Wolf development. So I think, you know, officers followed a logical process against the criteria around sort of the land ownership, the size, and obviously, you know, you can have specifics in there against a size quantum. There are more flexible things around location, proximity, you know, your constraints are sort of a different. Some of these things are not easy to sort of put into a, as we've talked about earlier, a weighting or a set criteria. But we've tried to sort of objectively, from an officer's perspective, work through that long list, through the short list against that. So every project's slightly different. There will be some that will have a really defined weighting. You know, going out and procuring something that relates to a project, you right at the beginning set your defined weighting criteria from a project perspective that you were going to measure that against. I think with regards to the equivalent or sort of commensurate, as I said, you know, we were guided by the Cabinet decision that members wanted to re-provide the golf, all of the elements of the golf facility, recognising the pitch and putt element particularly was that accessible, affordable entry into that. So we've looked at how best we can do that. That's kind of from a landowner perspective, you know, not straying into the planning world, because we are not at a planning application yet. You know, this decision was just to do due diligence and look at things further and what could be accommodated and how best we can meet that. You know, when you enter a planning process with regards to both Great Wolf and golf re-provision, you would then be guided by the planning policies, and then it would be up to that planning process to determine that against the policy compliance. So, you know, kind of don't want to stray there because that's not appropriate. I think the key point is, you know, just the basis of the information we had at that decision in time, and the decision to sort of suggest downgrade is worthy of further work and due diligence and recommendations to progress to the next stage. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, is it going to be a general one? Because I was going to suggest we might move in to look at some of the sites, Sean.
Yeah, just a quick 2 general ones.
Go on then.
Thank you, Chair. So you were talking about Minidown, and you were saying that obviously that's down the line. So was timing of the re-provision of the golf pitch and putt facility considered a constraint? Because it's not I don't think it's a statutory requirement to re-provide it. It was a decision made as part of the planning deal with Great Wolf. So if it was 5-10 years down the line that we re-provided it somewhere, is that possible? Also, just clarification on this paper. I did ask whether, for transparency, you could clarify what sites out of the shortlist came second and third, so that we have an idea of how close everything was, because they were all imperfect. And thinking ahead of Manydown, why wasn't the possibility, and it's a bit of a curveball, why wasn't the re-provision into the Manydown Countryside Park, possibly? Because that's a blank canvas, but it could be 5-6 years down the line.
Thank you. So the assessment criteria in 3.3 of the report did look at the ownership constraints and the ability to progress development within the required timeframe. The required timeframe being that sort of Cabinet through that decision-making process and through the contract with Great Wolf had to get a golf re-provision strategy, and Cabinet undertook to look to re-provide all 3 elements of the existing facility. And obviously at that point that decision was made prior to the sort of engagement with the clubs and the further due diligence. Downgrange was considered in an area that could re-provide potentially all three of those components. On the Manydown point, again, so that the time frame is obviously doesn't meet that criteria because it's not within our direct control, as I've explained before. So you wouldn't be able to do that within the time frames required alongside the Great Wolf resorts.
What is the time frame?
I don't have a definitive start and end date, but obviously Great Wolf, we've sort of entered into the contract with Great Wolf, and I think there are long stop dates in that. Again, I would have to get that information to you, Councillor. But Great Wolf are looking to progress their planning application this spring. Is spring 2026, so we need to have obviously worked our reprovision strategy alongside those timeframes.
So if you don't mind, Chair, if you had a phased strategy over a number of years, that surely would be acceptable. You don't have to re-provide everything in one go, surely.
I'm not sure that would work, would it? I mean, you could say that we were going to do something, and if you're not going to deliver it, many downs only just getting delivered after possibly planning for it 20 years ago. So we wanted to do something that's in our control, that meets the time frame.
And just for clarity, what came second and third?
Yeah, no, I think that's really good feedback. I think it's definitely having a weighting. I can't remember having what came second, third. It was more about finding the best site. So yeah, but the feedback to say more of a weighting, so we've got weightings, rating each site, and having more of a bit like the way they rate sites in the local plan. Maybe that's something we could look at in the future. So take that feedback and good.
So are you going to give me a second and third?
No, like I said, we didn't do that. We tried to find out which was the best site and pick the best site, because we were then going to go forward and further carry out engagement at that site, and also do further designs at that site. It comes to a point where the work the council puts in, there's sort of a cost to it. So we can't go out and engage throughout the borough. We chose the site, and then we started that engagement and further designs.
Okay, I think we've gone through the question. Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Right. When we do these due diligence officers, so there are two kinds of analysis that we do, which is qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. So the qualitative analysis is wishy-washy words saying that good, better, best. And when it comes to the quantitative analysis, for any decision, we go for the quantitative analysis. Have you done this quantitative analysis when you choose a particular site and give the points for everything and merit it? Based on that analysis, we make the decision. Even choosing a contractor, we do that process. Have you adopted that process, or you did, okay, I feel like this site is good and we went there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think, as I explained to sort of Councillor Hart, we've laid out the process clearly in the paper that we followed with regards to the criteria that we used, then the long list and the short list. And that's kind of where we're after. I don't think I've got anything more to say than that.
I think we've done the general questions. So I'm going to quickly sum up on where we've done around the general stuff, and then what we'll do is, as we don't have, say, sort of 2 or 3 alternative ones even in the shortlist, I'll ask members if there's any particular ones they'd like to look at a little bit more. In the spirit of what we do in resident services, as you well know, we quite often we do discuss things, and I take on board what Sean says. We're not making a decision at all, but obviously we are free to make recommendations, and I think making recommendations based on that, if we can find something that we look at, whether the recommendations are based on the sites or whether they're recommendations on other things we'd like the Cabinet to look at, I think that's very important in particular for this particular issue, because personally I never like leaving things hanging with a problem. I like to see if we can try and help work towards a solution irrespective of where we sit within the council, whether we're opposition or administration, because we've got residents that want the golf facilities and we've got residents that want to keep Down Grange. So let's see what we can do and see if we can come up with anything constructive, and that would be amazing if we went home and did that, but we might not, but let's give it a shot. So is there any particular shortlisted sites that anybody wants to look at with some of the data or discuss or go into detail on? let's see if there's any sites first, and then we'll come back to that, Jenny. Sean.
Yeah, I'm just looking down the sites. Can you just clarify, just for the committee, why the area around War Memorial Park over the other side, why was that discounted? Can you just clarify that? It was going into sort of Old Common.
I think you may be wrong there in that, are you talking about the school bit?
No.
Because
We looked at
so there's
all of
one,
this.
Old Common's in part of the design. Have you-
Do you have the page references there, Sean?
Go to what, page 113.
I think that's Appendix 3, isn't it, Sean? Yeah.
So I think in answer to your question, Councillor Dillo, we looked at the areas around Old Common, we looked at the areas around sort of the cricket pitch, around the existing sporting facilities, sort of tennis pavilions, and we also looked at, there's a little bit of land, what I'd call to the left of that as well, just below the car park. And the plans you've got show how you would map it could potentially overlay a course onto those areas, whether that's sort of six or 9 hole. And then what the SWAT obviously highlighted, from the strengths perspective, there is access there. There is a public car parking nearby. It is served sort of by local bus routes. The weaknesses, again, was the size of the site. You would need both to use both areas. You couldn't just consolidate it in one of the area or other, but there is connectivity through there. It was obviously a weakness was that there was the cricket pitch and existing sports pitch use there, and also the fact that Old Common and War Memorial is used for sort of events, larger events and event parking as well.
So looking at the 2 pages, the coloured pages, there's a 9 hole, isn't there, and then there's a 6. And obviously on Downgrange you're looking at 6 at the moment. I'm just wondering, it just seems to be very subjective that this was discounted.
I was going to say originally the proposal at Downgrange was a 9 hole. It was adapted during our engagement.
So maybe a recommendation might be to look at looking at those sites for 6 holes.
I'm going to throw in, and I'm looking at Councillor Hart and talk about Beggarwood, and because you can give us some insight into your ward and how you feel it would be met with what sort of resistance, because I do believe obviously there is the biodiversity, there's been a lot of work done up there. It's obviously a very big space, it's a very open space, and obviously it doesn't have much in the way of trees, which I know from my extensive discussions with Councillor Morrow, that obviously helps as well in reading the papers. So, and obviously officers can probably help us as well. But I'm going to ask you, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair, for putting me on the spot. Happy to give my opinion. Yeah, I think, I mean, you've got Old Down and you've got Beggarwood Park more or less pretty much opposite each other, although notwithstanding Old Down isn't technically in my ward, but I think if you tried to put this project or anything like it on Old Down, the outcry would make this year look quite muted, actually. Yeah. In terms of Beggarwood Park, it obviously, is a lovely big space. It does have a great deal of use already in a very similar way that Downgrange does in terms of walkers and dog walkers and people who use it with their kids and things. I think for me, part of the restriction there is that if you compare the two in terms of like the walkers, people who go to a space to walk for their mental health or to walk their dog or whatever, or their toddler, both have, I don't know because I've never gone out there with a clicker and done a count, both have, I imagine, sort of similar amounts of people who use it in that way. Although obviously you've got now Hounsome Fields and the golf course estates that Beggarwood Park is also serving for that purpose. But what you additionally have at Beggarwood Park, which you don't at Downgrange, is that you have commuter walkers. You've got 3 sides of very close housing. You've got Pets at Home, Lidl, Sainsbury's, and a well-loved flagship pub up the 4th side. So in addition to all of the people who travel there to walk, you have people crisscrossing it the whole damn time to do that. So I think the walking traffic probably is a great deal higher. In addition, you've got the BMX track, you've got a couple of very, very active nature groups, and it's got LNR status as well. So I think it's as problematic, if not possibly more so.
I'm going to ask the
Sorry
office.
to be a pain.
That's absolutely fine. I wanted, because I thought obviously you've got the local, you'll give them more opinion knowledge from residents, and I've asked the officers about sort of the whole Beggarwood Hatch Road, which is obviously the big space.
Just going to comment on one of the problems is the openness of the site as well. Like you say, a lot of cross walking, but actually not a lot of features. So yeah, very open site. I would say that would score less high on the safety side.
Councillor Watts?
Thank you. I'd just like to explore the differences between the War Memorial on the Old Common site and the Downgrange site, like on sizes, because I ran around the Old Common last weekend and it seemed a pretty similar size to where we're proposing to put the golf course at the moment. And we talked about the cricket pitch there. I mean, that is just an artificial pitch, and it's been derelict for years. I know the council have just spent a bit of money on it, but yeah, I still don't know how well used that area is. I would just like to know, what is the difference between that and the Downgrange site in sizes, because I think they're quite comparable.
Yeah, just an add, which was left off of this SWOT analysis, is there are football pitches there as well, which are used. I think there's 2. I'm sure there's 2. There would be possibly where we could move, because obviously we're looking to future ideas now. There is a chance that we could push a football pitch across and the artificial pitch, which was renewed and unfortunately has been had vandalism, and the council's going to relay that. We could move that closer and have one pitch, and then there is a possibility of size. Size-wise, I'll just ask the officers to look at what they came up with, because it's in the report. Pictures of how many holes they could fit in, and I'm sure they could do a pretty good pitch and putt on that site at Old Common.
So Old Common.
So they could fit 6, and then if you moved the football pitch over and the cricket pitch over, and you sacrificed a pitch, as long as that was okay with the playing pitch strategy, then you could probably put 2 more in and maybe have the clubhouse at the John Arlett Pavilion. So that's an option that I think is worth considering.
Stacey?
Thank you, Chair. Not to get all defender of the site-y, but in terms of War Memorial, I just think about it being where it is and as central as it is, and all the amazing events that we have there as a town, the flagship events that we have. No, I know, but that's where you have parking, and also when you had like the I've forgotten the damn name of it now, but the BMXy thingy that you did, that stretched round into that as well. And if you had, you know, and I have long range aims for it, I'm going to say at Basingstoke Festival, coming back at one point or another, you know, you're going to need an awful lot of space for those sorts of things. Not to mention, because of how central it is, I mean, just in walking distance, you know, within a stone's throw of the centre of town where it is, you know, you've got the Basingstoke Central Apartments, you've got Crown Heights, you've got the Mercantile Building that used to be the Barclays Building, you know, just hundreds and hundreds of flats as well. I'm not saying that's a reason to not do it there, just, you know, throwing in an opinion. If we're at the stage where we're sort of giving opinions on what we think about where this thing should go, if I was going to throw my tuppence worth into the ring, I think that looking at the process that the officers went through to get to the point where the decision went to Cabinet, as I said earlier, I'm not an expert. This is the first time I'm examining a process like this. It's possibly not 100% perfect, I don't know, but I think that a huge amount of work has been done. And I took on board what Councillor Mummalaneni was saying about qualitative versus quantitative. And I think, aside from looking at size, unless you're looking at, you know, specific acreage or hectareage or whatever it is, the quantitative scores in something like this is still going to be subject to a very subjective idea of what you want to weight in the first place, because, you know, you're going to be comparing these walkers to those walkers, etc. You know, you can choose to give them a numerical score if you like, but you're still going to be taking the decision on what that score should be, and therefore it is going to still be a subjective thing. I don't know whether in terms of the timeline, the councillor meeting where councillors at the time had the chance to feed in, where that was in terms of whether the opportunity was there to feed in to the criteria ahead of all of this due diligence work. But I'm not looking at this and seeing a particularly massively, obviously deficient process. I think a huge, huge amount of work has gone into it. And for all that people are entitled to their opinions on it, I think that the team deserves, you know, a well done for a really good piece of work. However, moving on, I think that at the time when we were asked to consider this in October, we were asked not whether we thought, as a lot of people thought, not whether we thought this thing should go on Downgrange or not, but we were asked whether we should stop basically doing this work or whether we should continue on doing this work. And at the time, we didn't know what a re-provision should look like. You know, it's clear from the discussions we've had tonight that no real roadmap was laid out at the point that that caveat was made, so it was left sort of entirely up to the ether as to what that might be, and the officers have taken a good go at it, and then of course everyone's going to disagree on what it should have been, but we have since learned that the governing bodies concerned have said that they are happy with the leisure park offering of the driving thing, I'm not good with golf terminology, the driving range and the adventure golf. And with that in mind, since we now have that confirmation, I think it does open up Many Down South to us in a way that perhaps it didn't before when this work was done. I think that the time frame that it would have presented when we didn't have any information on what a re-provision equivalent should look like or what time frame it should be on. It's very, very easy for these things to get pushed into the ether, and then, as Councillor Morrow pointed out, it could be 20 years later before we see it, and we've let all the golf users down. I think that that was fair to say that at the time it should be ruled out. I think that now it should be ruled back in. Now we have that information, and that should be something that we look at as part of the Many Down project going forward.
Just going to allow myself a little statement as well, because This has not been easy. It has been a difficult golf reprovision, and it's because the actual task is difficult. And I have done everything I can to make sure that I've talked to everyone, and I've spent a lot of time doing that. I think it's been a good process, and I just hope that people will see a little bit about the effort I put in. And you know, I think actually we're going to a good place now. We're not here to talk about the decision in January, but that reprovision, I think, has a good chance of going forward, and that we can look at different, like you say, we can look at different options now. Going back to War Memorial Park, it is an area of deficiency. So when you talk about all the flats and stuff, you know, that is something that comes into the decision. There's lots of people and there's not enough space. I'll let the officers...
Yeah, no. Thank you, Chair. Very difficult. These papers say quite clearly there is space for a 6-hole golf pitch and putt behind the hotel, in a piece of land that we don't generally use for the festivals and other areas. I know the paper says that it kind of suggests that we're supposed to suggest locations for this. And I think we're in danger of falling into the trap that's already been created here. Generally speaking, people are not happy with the decision that's been made. An awful lot of work's gone into making that decision, but people are generally not happy with it. We can't just come up with a nice little plan and do exactly the same thing and be criticised. You know, I think what we need to remember is there are a number of sites in here that have potential. I have not read anything in these papers that has convinced me that Downgrange was the place to go to. It was not an overwhelmingly positive thing. There are lots of things. If you go through the criteria, it misses about 5 of the 7. But they all do. There are problems with all of them, and it becomes a subjective decision about which one is chosen. And that is where we create a problem. And I think we do need to pull back and say, this is a scrutiny committee. We need to be giving scrutiny to the process. And I personally would like to recommend that the criteria are changed. The first one needs to go. Yeah. Land ownership does not have to be within the control of BDBC. It's about the contract which is made with any organisation, which either we control the things on that land or we hand it over to somebody else to run it. You know, Serco runs things for us. Other organisations run things for us. BITC runs the tennis centre for us. You know, it's not unusual for other people to run things for us. So some of these criteria, I feel, have limited our thinking about what is possible. I think we need to go back and look at the truly commercial things. We need to think about many down. We're 2026 in a couple of weeks. Yeah. If something can be produced in 2030, that sounds pretty good to me. And there will be infrastructure, there will be buses and things going to many down. You know, to say it won't have those things, I think it's being a bit daft, you know, it'll all be there. Yeah. And I'm very concerned that the majority of those places that are shortlisted, and I accept the shortlisting, there are people that use them all the time. They use them for recreational purposes, which are really important for health and well-being and for our sporting community. I'm full of admiration for our speakers who've been to municipal golf courses and actually looked at them. I have done my research online, and it is very clear that if you have a mix of golf, whether it's pitch and putt or proper golf, and dog walkers and people, those dog walkers and people have to stick to specific paths. And they're not allowed on the greens, and they're not allowed here and there and everywhere. It is not the same as saying free access. you know. So we need to be very open about it. The paper implies that it's a free-for-all for everybody. It is not, you know. So I have great concerns that any of the choices in the shortlist, other than perhaps many down, have fatal flaws. And so I would like to recommend that we go back and we look at the criteria again. I think it's the criteria that need to be looked at. I think we need a much better process of weighting those and assessing those rather than converting them into SWOTs, because those SWOTs to me all read much the same. There was nothing that distinguished one from another. They all had a problem. And I feel it's a red herring on the strategy thing. We must have a strategy within a time. A strategy, as we all know, is a document that sets out what you want to achieve. It does not have to have the end sight in that. A strategy is how you're going to get there. So I think we can meet the criteria legally. If it's just a strategy that we need, I don't think that that's the end of the world. I think we can have a strategy, and we just need to go back, Chair, and relook at it, not solve it for them this evening, because we can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And that's brilliant. What I was going to say, based on that, because I think that's right, and I was just about to come in on the idea of the constraints, which is talking criteria. I think the constraints that have come in have created a problem in themselves. And I think there's different options we need to be looking at, and we need to be there needs to be more openness, and the weighting I think is important, but also looking to say what other options, and in any way you would do with any business case, you would come up with your options and say why you have to dismiss them. And I think that's what we've potentially missed. And yes, you're right. I mean, the commercial thing would worry me in the same way I think Councillor Jones said, because of costs, potential cost to residents. But at least ways we need to be able to see that. And I think the other side of it is the recommendations, looking at alternate, even with the sites that have been shortlisted, looking at alternate options, as we've said, where they've done it for Downgrange, then I think that's a possibility as well. So I think that's two potential good ones we need to see, and even at least understand the constraints and the criteria better, get better quantitative data, as Aaron would say, and then from that work through and then say what other options could there be. Councillor Watts. I
agree, it would be good to have a look at those. And also, I would be concerned about using the War Memorial for the reasons that Councillor Hart said. It's a good big space that we can use in the town for festivals and things like that. And I think if we did use that space, it would really limit our, it would limit us. It would limit our ability to be able to provide different festivals. I would be interested, so the Cabinet in 2023, they agreed in principle about reproviding, thank you, reprovisioning the golf provision. I mean, I didn't know if they had any sites that would potentially they had in mind at the time, the Cabinet at the time, and also there's no reason, I mean, we've still got the option to go ahead and put the adventure golf and the golf pods, the driving ranges, up at the leisure park. And then and I understand that is an acceptable reprovision, and that there isn't a statutory requirement for us to have a pitch and putt. So maybe that's one of the things we need to consider, that we look at that and then look at the pitch and putt in the future. I personally, in some ways, I get all the arguments against Downgrange, but in part of me thinks actually, because it is a sports facility, that's just another sport to put there. But I completely get the feeling from the public around why they don't want it there. But I did think on the surface, and having lived in Basingstoke all my life, that would be a reasonable place to put it. And I understand why that was chosen, and I think the officers have done a really good job on what they've put together so far.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question about the golf pod scenario in comparison to the current driving range, because I think obviously people sort of a bit vague about whether it is this sort of like for like. I believe, because Kerry and I had a good chat about this, and I understand from Golf England it's deemed to actually potentially be quite a good alternative. So if anybody would like to sort of explain it, but so everybody is clear, because I think it's probably the one thing that sounds like the least like for like.
Thank you, Chair. So the golf pod, it is a, I mean, we're looking at sort of 10 to 20 bays within the golf pod. It's enclosed within a space that's netted in, so rather than a full-size driving range where you might be able to hit the ball, 300 yards or so, it's limited to hitting the ball about 30 metres into the net. It then utilises tracking technology to show you on a screen how far the ball would have gone and which direction and what speed and what have you. So it does provide that kind of like-for-like driving range facility. The current driving range is 21 bays at the golf centre. It's literally just a bay, there's no technology. So the thinking behind the new facility will be that it will be more attractive to golfers because they'll be able to look at the statistics and help to practice and improve on their game. It also provides the opportunity to play virtual courses, so you can actually play a round of golf within the golf pod itself. So it almost provides that sort of replacement for a pitch and putt course. So it will provide you with target practice, playing virtual golf, and you can download the app on your phone, whether it's Top Tracer or Top Golf, and you can keep the statistics and you can sort of continue to improve as you go along and continue to play. So I mean, we consider that to be a big improvement on the technology that's currently available. The other improvement will be that if we are looking at the leisure park as the location for the golf pod, we can extend the opening hours. So at the moment the current driving range is open to either 7 or 8 p.m. in the evening in the summer. On the leisure park it can be open for longer, so more and more people can sort of come along and play for longer and get involved in the game. So that's the reason for the golf pod being considered to be an acceptable like-for-like reprovision of the driving range.
Okay, has anybody got anything else they would like to add or explore before we go to recommendations? Councillor Jones, you're not supposed to, but if it's a very... Okay, go on. Thank you, Tony. Did you want to add anything to the talk about? Because I do believe the pictures have been looked at the length, haven't they, from what I'm going through the detail? Has that been addressed?
It's a bit contradictory because we've had a lot of, sort of bad opinions about shortening the number of holes, making the holes shorter. So I would have, so there's balancing people who say they don't want it shrunk. But I totally agree with the outdoor activity, and that's one of the reasons we want to keep that facility, because it does actually get people in the outdoors. So that's why we want to in the future actually make sure we do a pitch and putt. Hopefully we get a chance now to find a location where you can really get a one that's like for like in size and quality. So thanks.
Okay, I said I'd sum up after the last, but I'm going to just do a quick sum up before we go to the recommendations. So we heard from the public members here, and obviously a lot of talk about, there was the disc golf, the provision, and basically safety issues were mentioned, and also around all the excellent data that they've collected. And I hope that has been, I believe, has been passed to officers and councillors to make sure that that is taken into consideration. I'm hoping that you have heard a good discussion go on tonight regarding the site and what we're trying to achieve here to make sure we try and obviously meet residents' needs, because it is very, very important. Like for like, it's mentioned several times as well. I wanted to talk about the golf pods to make sure everybody realised, because I felt personally as a non-golfer that's the one that comes out at me as particularly difficult, and obviously like for like on number of holes, etc., with the volume of people going around. The big thing I think that's come out is really, as Jenny very succinctly summed up, around the talk about the constraints, and Sean also talked about it in the weightings. And actually, although we believe and absolutely there's been an awful lot of work gone into this, and I know there's been many hours and an awful lot of effort from everybody involved with this. There's no two ways about it. No one's shirked off on anything. But obviously we haven't got a satisfactory conclusion that we can come to tonight. However, we can make recommendations. And so I think that's really, I think, is basically, I believe, a reasonable summing of where we've talked tonight. We've certainly explored things in quite a bit of depth, I believe, and even sort of talked about a couple of the sites that felt the obvious ones. Go on, Jenny.
I would like to make a recommendation that the committee can vote on, that the criteria are re-looked at. That was what I said in my speech, that the criteria are re-looked at, that it is opened up, for things like the first one, where it has to be BDBC land, that those things are re-looked at, the commercial options are re-looked at, because it's about the contracting side, and that there is a proper weighting, qualitative, quantitative project approach to this. That is what I would like this committee to recommend. Thank you.
Do you agree to that, or Stacey, do you want to go into a bit more detail on that?
I wanted to, I guess, before we sort of rush to a vote, kind of ask a little bit more about it, I guess, because I think that we've established that there was very little or almost no guidance given in terms of the criteria in the first place. Now, I'm not saying this criteria was right or wrong, but I think that we have established that it's a very subjective thing, very likely. But essentially, if on the one hand you're saying we're here to scrutinise and not advise, we're saying don't do these criteria, do different ones. I'm not going to tell you which, but do it again, please. And it is different without, where is that advice going to come from? Where are those different, where are the different criteria going to come from that everyone is going to be happy with? What would be the guidance on doing it better?
These criteria, not saying they were wrong in the first place, the world has moved on. You can be subjective about those criteria. What I'm saying is that the paper, I'm not wedded to any answer. I honestly am not. I feel there are problems to scrutinise it, that the downrange answer is the right answer. So I am saying in a scrutiny. So that is why I'm saying let's go back and ask them to relook at it. The world's moved on. No, it's a year, 18 months. And I would suggest some of those criteria about what the criteria should be. I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. I'm saying that the paper that we've received tonight does not tell me how.
Please don't tell me we're going to start scrutinising basketball now. I think that what I'm asking is if we are going to vote for the criteria to be re-examined, what then is the next step? If I were to vote yes for that, for example, what then is the next step in the process? Do the officers come back with a list of criteria that they check with us and we say whether they're... Does that mean we go back to the drawing board entirely? I want to know what the consequences of this vote are. I think that's a fair question.
Okay, I'm transferring across. I think Councillor Morrow had a comment to make, and I don't know if the officers have got any backup on that one.
Just wanted to make a comment because we're scrutinising a decision made almost 12 months ago. A lot's happened since then. It's very difficult to remember what the position was back then. Land ownership was a important criteria back then because we had a time constraint with Great Wolf. Since then, England Golf have come back to us and said that a reprovision at the leisure park is acceptable, and that changes the whole situation, and it allows suddenly maybe where the time constraint has left. So, so looking at different criteria now is something that I certainly would, welcome. I think, sorry, I've made my point.
Yeah, and I kind of think, it's sort of a cabinet decision, really. I think, the criteria, as the criteria is listed in the paper, scrutiny can make recommendations on the criteria, of course. You have the same criteria, you'll come up with the same outputs. Unless you fundamentally change the criteria, you're not going to change the flex and the scope of what you can consider. As officers, we assessed against that criteria determined at that point of time. As I sort of said at the beginning of the meeting, we did start off by having conversations with third parties, exploring commercial offers, and also looking at alternative land. So that has been happening in the background, whilst obviously we focused on this criteria, and that's what we've worked through. That's fine. We can continue to do that, and we can, take that away and explore that in the future if instructed ultimately by cabinet. I think the key for me then is the impact of that and the timing, and then obviously there will be a report coming to cabinet in January, which will look at reprovision on the leisure park. There is still the pitch and putt, so those recommendations I think just need to factor in the consideration of the timeline, and then looking at how best a future pitch and putt is provisioned, and there may be a lag in that provision.
Thank you. So I'm just going to read the recommendation to the committee again, just to be clear. So what we are being asked to do is to review the process and evidential basis supporting the cabinet decision made on the 7th of January 2025 to select Downgrange as the preferred site for the reprovision of golf facilities subject to planning permission. We're not making any decision on whether it was even that. We're just reviewing it and going through it, which I think we have done thoroughly. I think what we've identified is that we feel that the report we've got potentially hasn't given us, has got some bits missing. And I recognise what Councillor Vauxhall says there about some of it. You sort of think, well, actually, and Sean said as well about the sort of the weightings and looking through the SWOTs. It doesn't jump out to me. What it says to me is that it was, as I said before, a very difficult decision to make with everything, with challenges. So I don't think there is any question that the work wasn't done as thoroughly as possible based on some set constraints and criteria. I think we can ask for an update on this current status, as Councillor Morrow said. Things have moved, things have changed. We know the leisure park's different. This report and the appendices reflect very much on the state from when it was originally done, and there's been a lot of work done since then to try to mitigate against some of the concerns. So I think we could have an updated report at least that covers these areas, picks up on that criteria that we felt have been missed. It'd be interesting to see where the EM5 stuff as well, and making sure we haven't lost green space or will potentially lose green space against that policy going forward with the Great Wolf development as well. So I think they're to me are the points that we really need to see from there. Councillor Vauxhall.
Thank you, Chair. That's a very good summary, but I would just like to, as was said right at the beginning of the meeting, is a recommendation from this committee. This is not a decision-making committee, and we all need to remember that. We could vote a recommendation, but it is for the Cabinet to decide whether they agree with that recommendation and act on it. So I just want to reassure members of this committee that we are not making a specific decision about this, because we're not a decision-making body. So I just think that's a...
I think in the spirit of this committee, we generally tend to come to a reasonable consensus of opinion anyway, but if we wish to have a vote, we can have a vote on it. I hope, I don't think there's any problem with that, that's democracy. So, thinking of the wording for our recommendation, because it's quite complex, Jenny, I don't know if you've written anything down, because you've been quite good. Do you want to have a go at the words? Because you've been very... No, I thought did I say, oh, did you get all that? So we'll leave it to Ellie to do, and then Ellie and I'll have a review and we say, oh, no, but you want, no, we don't. We need to vote on it, don't we? We need to see it today. Right, Ellie.
So, Chair, something about, I'm making it up, something about the world has changed and moved on. That the officers and the Cabinet have received updated information about where some of the reprovision could be placed. It would be helpful to go back and relook at the criteria, widen it perhaps, don't know whether you want those words in, come up with ways of weighting that criteria and re-looking at the opportunities of commercial and non-commercial sites. And then I think you added about bringing a report back, I think. And I think there was something about something or other. EM5. Is that vaguely what people are looking at? You know, because I think what we've all agreed is that there is no one site that stands out. It is really, really hard. But bearing in mind the world has moved on, let's take the time to have a pause and look at it. And I think we can still meet our legal requirements with Great Wolf. If it's a strategy that's required, we can create that strategy. Let's do it right. I mean, my feeling is let's get it in the right place and celebrate that and make it happen. I mean, think how many years it's taken us to reprovide the aquadrome, for example. You know, we need to get it right rather than do something quick and get it wrong.
Basically, we can vote on a recommendation to adjust the criteria, and then after that we can ask for a report as a second thing. That it separates it out to make it simple. Does that sound reasonable? Now, Stacey. Oh.
Sorry, I was thinking about, you know, the difference in what we are asked to do in terms of scrutinising what has been done up until January of this year, so a year ago, and what it is that Cabinet are looking at, you know, going forward. And they're obviously not just looking at which site, they're also looking at the when, they're looking at the golf users. I am not one, but they are looking at, you know, reprovisioning something. We don't have a statutory time frame, but we do have, you know, an obligation in terms of our various plans and things, in, you know, to make that happen. I don't think that re-examining the criteria is necessarily a bad recommendation. I wonder if asking them to consider that and balance it against the varying needs of moving forward, particularly given the fact that we have a reprovision that the governing bodies are happy with. And in a site like Many down south, although I'm not saying that that's a fait accompli by any stretch of the imagination, a thing that more or less got consensus here this evening, and whether it's worth, you know, and I understand that they don't have to follow our recommendation, but I don't know why we would give it if we didn't want them to, whether it's worth hanging up that process with sort of redoing the homework with something that would then be very, very subjective all over again. We could ask them to consider it in balance with all the other factors.
I agree. There will always be subjectivity, I think, in this. That is going to be different. I think it's about trying to tighten up things to start with. So I think we can put that. So what I've scribbled down now, I put the recommendation is for Cabinet to review the criteria, and we could say to demonstrate more objectivity? Or I think the criteria is the criteria, and because, sorry if I say, so that's the recommendation is to review the criteria, so that's the criteria and the way it's presented, and then recommend an updated report reflecting the new criteria and updated situation is presented to the committee.
Chair, what's less clear to me is the process then. Because if all we're doing is recommending that the criteria is looked at, then what happens after that? So it is the process going to be, because for me, the process is about engaging with people to find out, what are the criteria that should be there, talking to the golfers that use the current place, talking to users, talking to the ward councillors. If there's a feeling of there is more engagement that could be had. And then it's about looking at the put some process around that. There needs to be, this is not intended to be critical in any way, but then there needs to be a more robust approach to the way that the criteria is used to assess the sites. It's always going to be a degree of subjectivity, but it is amazing that if you try to do qualitative and quantitative stuff in a project, it is incredibly interesting how it comes out, that actually you do come with results that from what the criteria are to a SWOT, which says pretty well the same thing about every site, and then to it's going to be here. And so I just feel that the process needs...
And consider a more robust approach to analysing the sites proposed in provision for the replacement facility.
That residents have been fully engaged.
Sorry, may I ask? If Cabinet were to take up this recommendation and do it in the way that you would like to see it done, does that essentially mean going back to the drawing board?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
To the Cabinet.
May I answer that for you, Chair? There's an awful lot of, it is up to the Cabinet, but there's an awful lot of work that's already been done. There's a lot of material in here. So I don't think it's about going back to square one. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, the long list to the short list look pretty reasonable to me. But I mean, it wouldn't take long to relook at that, for example. So it's not for me to say this is how you must do it. It's for Cabinet to do that. What I'm saying as the scrutiniser is that this is not convincing.
It's just subjective.
I think that whatever it comes out, somebody will be unhappy about it.
No, I understand that. I'm trying to, because I think, and we're going around the same points here as well. I understand that we can't, we're not a decision-making body, but when you make a recommendation, it's for something that you want to be done. So I wanted to understand whether we were talking about going back to the drawing board entirely, or whether you're talking about reanalysis of the data that we already have.
Chair, I think it's inevitable there will be some reassessment of the data, because there needs to be a weighting system, there needs to be some objectivity about it. There just has to be, I think, for it to be rigorous and for people to feel that it's open and transparent, because, I mean, I think as a lot of people said at full council the other night, you can't take everybody with you in every decision that you make, because there are always people that feel it works for them and people that don't. But even the people who don't need to feel that they've been listened to and that their views may not have been agreed with, but they accept that they've been listened to and this is the best that they can come up with, And I feel at the moment we haven't got there.
Chair, can I just say, I think it's important that we get this right, because it's so big, and to get it wrong would be an enormous mistake for this council. So I think if we recommend that it's looked at again, not back to the drawing board because there is a lot of work here, but I think so that we are clear that everything has been fair, transparent and robust, and we can look our residents in the eyes and say that the decision made is the decision made with everything out there, and these are the reasons why. And because at the moment I just feel that this is a really totally subjective decision, out of a number of places that are equally as bad, because we don't know which scenarios and which criteria were weighted, or we can't possibly have that site because it's going to cost us too much money. We can't have that one because it's near some flats, or we can't. So I think it's too important to get wrong, and I think it's so important.
Totally agree with that. I don't think, although I think it would be a bit unfair to say to officers that it was subjective, because I'm sure they have done their utmost to be as objective as possible with what they've had to deal with. Did I see some? Oh, Joe.
I'm a bit confused now, Councillor Dillon. The decision that we're scrutinising is one that was taken last January. We can't change that decision, which was to explore looking at the best option at that time, as they saw it, for the golf provision to be on Downgrange. You've already heard that there is this expectation that that actually might be moving forward and that there might be other opportunities. So I think what we do need to do is say that perhaps this committee is saying that the decisions that were made in January last year, and maybe the decisions that were made when they made the arrangement with Great Wolf, who knows, because we haven't got the full story of that, probably was not examined enough in the papers that we've got, but obviously the officers did do the work. But obviously from what our point of view is that there are people here who feel that they still don't understand why certain ones were chosen ahead of others, and that basically, as Councillor Vaux says, none of them actually did tick all the boxes, but it was the best of the bunch, if you like. So I think we need to be careful when we talk about the criteria, because we can't change the criteria that was used to make the decision last January. What we can ask is that they consider the criteria for the choice of the final option that they're going to go for, not the one that's already been disputed, and obviously the residents have made their concerns and the councils have made their concern. So really what we're now saying is that we weren't particularly happy about the outcome and perhaps the way that it's been presented to us, that we were fully confident that the decision they made last January may not have been based on things that we would have chosen to have. But moving forward, obviously for the next decision, when it comes, that is actually perhaps as a more robust criteria for us to scrutinise in the future, because I think the Cabinet are going to make that decision in January. We will not have time to look at it again, but we could scrutinise as whether the criteria in the future for future projects is actually something that we as a scrutiny committee would have full confidence in. I don't know whether that helps at all or whether that makes the water more muddy, but I'm a bit concerned that we could be voting on something that's already happened, which we can't change because that decision was made. We're not changing that decision, we're just deciding whether that decision was a good decision based on good facts or not.
I'm going to let Aaron go.
Sorry, I'm sorry. If we cannot change the decision, or we cannot influence any of the cabinet members, or we cannot influence any of these, why are we wasting 6:30 in the evening coming here, around 20 people, and the residents came all the way here and listening that, okay, we just need to endorse what the decision has been made. Is it the fair democracy is going on here?
I'm not saying that we cannot say that the decision last year was the wrong decision, but it was the decision made. We can't change it, but what we can do is say whether we feel that the process is suitable to have made that decision, and moving forward, whether we would like to see the criteria that is going to be used to judge what happens next is better than the previous one. Like, we can't change the decision. You know, I'm not saying whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. We are not here to do that. We are here to see if the process was followed properly, which I believe the paper does actually demonstrate it was, and that a lot of the engagement was done after that decision was made. Now, maybe in the future, we should say that you do the engagement before it goes to the Cabinet. But that is something that we could say, but obviously that's not been put forward.
Jenny?
Chair, so just following up on those 2 points. This paper asks us to review the process and evidential basis supporting the Cabinet's meeting. So absolutely, Cabinet made a decision. We've reviewed that process. I'm not going to re-go there about what we've said. We've all said it. Second one is review sites considered and suggest locations for a pitch and putt facility in the borough. So what we would like to recommend is that the Cabinet look at the criteria for a pitch and putt facility in the borough, given that things have moved on since the decision in January, and that it is a decision that can be made for the pitch and putt. I don't see there's a problem with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I've been recommended we go to a vote, because I think we'll have to, as they say, agree to disagree, and the vote will allow for that. What I've put down as the recommendation is it's a recommendation to go to Cabinet to review the criteria used and consider a more robust approach to considering sites proposed in provision for the replacement facility, and ensure transparency and fairness to stakeholders are engaged appropriately. And then we would like to recommend an updated report. Now, actually, yes, I can see saying that if we talk about the engagement with residents, that's already happened, unless you're thinking of doing it for other sites as well. Right, I get you. So, yeah, so I think maybe as the engagements happened, we're looking at the sites. Sean, would you agree? Or we'd have to engage with residents then on the other sites, wouldn't you? So this does start getting complicated. Yeah.
Can I just make a suggestion, Chair, that can we narrow it just to the pitch and putt?
Yes, sorry.
Rather than saying sites.
The only reason why, this is what the paper asks for, is pitch and putt. Absolutely correct. I just wonder whether the whole package of the different elements make a good package that could be considered in a golf club area or something like that. And are we missing an opportunity? And that's my only caveat, because that was talked about. And the officer here did say that it might warrant going back and looking at it. So that's my only caveat. I know that's what the paper says, but I just put that out.
I think there's also the issue that we've talked about time constraints. We've talked about Many Down possibly becoming a little bit more of a potential. There's been various different sites. Now we've got the leisure park. So I think it does need a fresh look without obviously redoing everything. I think that's quite reasonable. I agree, Joe, what you said. We can't go back and change the decision that's been made. But I think we've sat and we've scrutinised the decision that was made, which in a sense is like, well, the purpose, the outcome we're looking for is to address residents' concerns. That's the reality of why we're here. And that's why I've spent this evening being here. And even if, we can get tied up in all the words, but what we'd like to do is we'd like to ask Cabinet to have another look at this and give it a shot and just see. And as I say, that can be thrown out by Cabinet and ignored if they choose to do. And otherwise they could look and think about, well, actually, yes, maybe, we've missed something here, having potentially if they're sitting, listening and watching through this and think, well, maybe there is some other things, and Kerry's obviously been here who's heavily involved with this. So from that perspective, I think that's an opportunity that's there. Aaron?
I understand, Chair. The decision was made to make 9 holes pitch and putt down range. And later, after detailed study, it has been nailed down to 6 holes. And original decision was taken because they thought they can accommodate 9 holes, and then they reduced to 6 holes. Now all these sites need to be considered with 6 holes now and find the solution. That is what the one criteria I would like to add here when they review it.
I think I'm going to go back to Jenny and Sean's points about us scrutinising, and that gets into specifics. So I totally hear where you're coming from, but I don't know whether we should do that. I don't know what other members think on that.
My personal view is it's been noted in our comments today. I think we could put a lot of different things in. But I think that was accepted by officers and Councillor Morrow, that actually 6 is different to 9.
Okay, I think we're there. I think we're going to let's go and undo the vote on that, as I say, because it is the semantics. I think you know, Kerry, I think is a reasonable person as the cabinet member looking after this. And, you know, I think he understands where we're coming from. He's sat through this and heard. So if I've read out that recommendation a couple of times, does anybody need me to read that again, or are you just happy with the kind of like the gist of where we've got? Ellie's made notes of that. She's written it down, and it will come out. Stacey, I see you're thinking about saying something. You're okay. Okay, so we'll do a vote on that now to pass that recommendation, and also, and then we can talk about, obviously that doesn't include an updated report based on the outcome of that, which obviously potentially may well be a cabinet report anyway, but we need to see that, and I know that is the timeline, but the timeline was also one of the criteria which can be looked at, you know, obviously with its stipulations around Great Wolf and all the implications from that. So if we can have a show of hands, please, for those who are in support of the recommendation. So the recommendation has passed, I believe. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for all your time. And we'll do this. Second recommendation is for a report to come out of that. And I think we don't need to vote on that. Do we have, is everybody happy with the report? Thank you. Right, okay, we haven't quite finished the meeting. I do hope, I know you guys at the back, thank you for your patience. Hopefully that was an interesting experience, if nothing else. And, you know, let's see where we go from here, and let's see if we can try and get the right outcome for everybody. So moving on to item 5. It's to just note the recommendation tracker, which I believe we had several recommendations from our last meetings. Oh, I haven't got it on here, which I think are now all complete. And we've now got 2 fresh recommendations. And finally, we will review the work programme. So bearing in mind what we've just recommended, if that recommendation is accepted, that could mean it throws out our work programme. Hey, does anybody want fortnightly resident services committee meetings? Thank you, guys. Thank you. Right, so just quickly going through it, we have got in January, we're supposed to be looking at the Community Engagement Grant Scheme and the Wellbeing Update. I somehow doubt, I look at Ellie and Fiona, that we would have an update by January, would we, for this?
For this?
Yeah, that would be very, very tight. So it looks like that means, so potentially, well, January, then we've got the Community Engagement Grant Scheme and Wellbeing Update. And so it could be February, which has currently got the approach to weed control in the borough, which was one that I raised, and addressing graffiti on utility cabinets, which is one Stacey raised. So I'll discuss with Fiona and Ellie about times, I think, on that one, because we could either end up with a heavy meeting in February or consider moving one of those items. And then obviously in March we want to review the waste strategy. I think that's very important, and the anti-poverty strategy as well. So anything that anybody else wants to do?
Chair, I would like to propose a topic to introduce the diversity and inclusion, equality, diversity and inclusion report for this committee on the impact on the resident services.
Apparently it's going to resources. Is there an aspect of EDI that you would like included under the sort of resident services side of things?
Yes, I would like to include this.
Oh, you mean you'd like to?
What aspect? Oh.
Okay, interesting enough, Aaron. When we, and actually we will also have to add on here is our task and finish group updates. Ellie and I spoke about that, which was supposed to happen. Obviously, with all this stuff, it's kind of gone to one side. The report's on its way, and we can potentially do a quick update on that. And that we'll have to put that into January, I think. Will it be ready by then? Yeah. So we can do that in January. One of the points, why I went off on tangent there, was because I've been talking about this sort of inclusion in a general way, as needing to go through, and that would potentially should come into the wellbeing strategy, I would like to think, in respect of resident services. So if there's any more you want to talk about that, Aaron, let's have a chat.
She's talking about sports, and you want to talk about something else.
I'm just talking, that's the wellbeing strategy is more than sport, isn't it?
Well-being is more about sports one, right? Is it sports?
No. It's not only sport sports related wellbeing.
When is it coming?
Chair, where does EDI fall? I don't see it in our policies here. The topic
It
area.
comes under resources.
Does it?
Yeah.
So maybe it needs to go there, Aaron.
The resources committee.
Yes, Councillor Mullany was, I think, sorry for taking the words out of your mouth, was talking about residents who are accessing services provided by the council and how our EDI policies impact on them.
That sounds excellent, and I think yes, that would be a really good. And it might be worth. What we can do, Aaron, is get that onto a work programme request. So, because if you do the work programme request, you will specify the specifics that you're looking at exploring, so we can go into more detail around that one. So if there's particular areas, if it's obviously beyond sport, if you're talking about sort of language barriers in like customer service or something like that, or whatever, or if there's any, I don't know what exactly you're sort of thinking of. So you'll have some ideas that you want to get down, and you can go into detail on the form and pass that to Ellie. And then we'll get that in there. Okay, so thank you everybody for a very, very well done meeting tonight. You're welcome. And I think we're at the end of the meeting. Yay! Merry Christmas.